Go get 'em, boys! Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, with patch 1.1 hitting a couple of days ago, there weren't really any changes to the top-end builds, but in this patch there were a number of buffs to lesser-used parts of Druid as a class, and so since this patch happened, I've been trying tons of variations of companion builds. As of course, a proper companion build is something that we've all wanted as Druid since launch, but the wolves just have had sort of a lot of issues as a base. What about now then? Well, today's build will show you. Out of all the different versions of a companion build that I've tried, this was my favorite one by a fair margin. It may be slightly offensively weaker than a companion build's peak could be, but it is defensively much stronger than that would be. And in my time so far, I can confidently say that a companion-focused Druid build isn't necessarily doing a tier 100 Nightmare dungeon anytime soon, but this build is more than capable of taking on dungeons a few levels above you without issues, as well as any sort of even levelish content in the game. It is slower than an actual meta Druid build, of course, but it's actually quite fun for a number of reasons. The first is companions. Getting to actually use a companion-based build is just enjoyable because until now you just sort of couldn't do that without feeling extremely weak, but now they are good enough to get the job done. On top of this, not only are we playing with bonus wolves, we're playing with werewolf companions instead of normal wolves, and we've got them as lightning werewolves too, so they look sick as well. Basically, the point that I'm trying to get at here is this build isn't meta breaking, but it's good enough to function in endgame content properly and succeed at anything really that isn't high tier Nightmare dungeon level content. And if you're someone who's wanted to have a companion build that works, this is a really fun one in my opinion. Without further ado then, we'll get into the skill points and where I've put them, the spirit boons that I've chosen for the build, the legendaries and uniques that make it function properly, general gearing concepts to stick to as well, the Paragon setup that I'm currently using and how I plan to expand it, and then finally, of course, just a bit of how to play and any tips that I have for you as well. First off then, let's dive into the skill points, and for your basic skills, we are spending a lot of points here. The main reason for this is that the build does not have a core skill. Instead, the vast majority of the damage from the player character itself is from Claw as well as Storm Strike, through the use of the Great Staff of the Crone unique. So we stick the full 5 ranks into Claw itself, also grabbing Enhanced Claw for the 15% attack speed bonus, and then Wild Claw for the double strike chance on the attack. Then we also take Storm Strike, as well as Enhanced Storm Strike, and then also Fierce Storm Strike. This makes it so that our Claw, through Crones, has a 15% immobilized chance and a 50% vulnerable application chance as well. Then moving on to the core skill node cluster, we're going to be grabbing 3 ranks of Predatory Instinct for 6% bonus critical chance against close enemies, as well as 3 ranks of Digidegrade Gate for 9% bonus move speed in werewolf form. This is how we'll be spending the vast majority of our time, so that's just a nice movement speed bonus in general. Then in the defensive cluster, we're going to be taking Earthen Bulwark, as well as this enhancement, which gives you a nice meaty barrier that also grants you Unstoppable while active to make you immune to crowd control effects. Then for the final enhancement for this, it's really your choice. Realistically, Innate Bulwark would add damage to the build in higher tier dungeons because of the way that it works. It's sort of bugged, but personally I'm running Preserving Bulwark because to me, the theme of this build is the companions do the damage, right? Everything else is just supporting that in some way, shape, or form, and this actually works quite well for that purpose, providing us with tons of Fortify, making us more survivable, and thus letting us put more of our other resources into our companions' damage. We're also going to be grabbing Blood Howl as well as its enhancement, then also Preserving Blood Howl. As a total, this makes us a 20% heal on a 15-second cooldown base, reduced by 1 second for every kill that you get, and also giving you a 15% attack speed bonus for 4 seconds after you cast it. Then we grab 1 rank of Ancestral Fortitude for a passive 5% increase to non-physical resistances, mostly just as a gateway to let us get 3 ranks of Vigilance for 15% general damage reduction for 6 seconds after casting a defensive skill. Part of this build is that we'll be casting Earthen Bulwark more than once every 6 seconds, so we basically just keep this constantly active. Then we get to the companion skill node cluster, and you may be sitting there thinking, how on earth does this guy have 15 ranks of wolves? Well, to put it simply, my equipment itself doesn't even have perfect affixes. That number should actually be 19, which is its peak. The Poison Creeper over here as well should be 12, not 8, both of which would be a pretty notable damage increase when I get them, but I still wanted to show this to you all, even without having the perfect gear, so you can see what it looks like at this stage, knowing that it even has more room to get a fair amount stronger as a result. That said, we put 5 ranks into wolves with our skill points themselves, the rest is from gear. We also grab Enhanced Wolf Pack for a 25% increased damage multiplier to wolves when they're attacking poisoned enemies. All enemies will be poisoned all the time, so this is constantly active. Then it's your choice between the following 2 options. Brutal Wolf Pack is the damage increased choice, increasing wolf attack attack speed by 25% for 3 seconds after the player gets a crit. Ferocious Wolf Pack is the defensive choice, giving you lucky hit chance on any wolf attack to gain Fortify, though personally I think Earthen Bulwark's Fortify generation is enough for this build if you choose that option, so you don't need to do this. After that, we put 5 ranks into Poison Creeper itself to really max the damage of that ability too. We also take Enhanced Poison Creeper for a 1 second immobilized duration increase. Then here again, you have a choice. Ferocious Poison Creeper is more damage from Creeper itself. Extended Poison Duration means more ticks, which means more damage per cast. Or Brutal Poison Creeper up here, which gives you 20% bonus crit chance on strangled enemies. That is totally viable, and it mostly depends on your actual crit chance. If your crit chance from your gear is low, Brutal Poison Creeper is better, as it lets you proc the Pack Leader Spirit Boon more often for more skill resets. But once your crit is high enough, Ferocious Poison Creeper is actually better, as the damage increase that it does is quite notable. Finally, we grab 3 ranks of Call of the Wild over here for a 30% damage increase multiplier on companions. I also have 3 ranks of this on my amulet, which you absolutely want for this build if possible. Then we move on to the Wrath skill node cluster, and in here we're grabbing 1 rank of Neurotoxin so that any poisoned enemies are also slowed, 1 rank of Toxic Claws so our werewolf skill critical hits apply poison, and then also 3 ranks of Envenom so both the player and companions get a 30% increased crit damage multiplier against poisoned enemies, which of course is very relevant to the build, with us not only having high crit chance, applying poison on crits just all the time, and then this also affecting our companion damage as a bonus. Then moving on to the ultimate skill node cluster, we're going to be grabbing Cataclysm here for a rain of lightning and tornadoes when it's active. We'll also be getting its first enhancement for a 4-second duration, but not the second one because we don't need extra vulnerable procs. This makes Cataclysm a 12-second active period on a 50-second cooldown, at least with my stats, but we lower that cooldown significantly too. Then we're going to be grabbing 3 ranks of Defiance for a 12% damage increase multiplier with nature magic skills against elite, and here is where we start to have a bit more fun. Storm Strike, obviously nature magic, right? Claw, nature magic because of the Great Staff of the Crones, of course, but we are also using the Storm's Companion unique legs, which makes wolves deal lightning damage, but part of that is it also turns wolves as a skill into a nature magic skill, letting them get some of these bonuses, including this one. We then grab 1 rank of Natural Disaster for the 4% increased nature magic damage multiplier against immobilized enemies, but mostly just as a gateway for 3 ranks of Resonance, which is a 6% increased damage multiplier to nature magic skills, but increase that to an 18% increase if you use a Storm skill directly after an Earth skill or vice versa. Examples of that working very well in this build are Earthen Bulwark into Wolves active as they count as a Storm skill, Earthen Bulwark into Cataclysm to affect the entire duration of the ultimate's damage, or the more common Earthen Bulwark into Claw for just a nice constant damage bump. Then finally we have our key passive, and for this I've gone for Nature's Fury, as a bit of a linchpin of this is a finished build. This makes Storm skills have a 30% chance to proc Earth skills in the same category, and vice versa. The effect itself isn't bad, but it's the synergy that it unlocks for us later that makes it really key to have. With that then, let's move on to our Spirit Boons within the build. In the Deer path, we are of course grabbing Wariness for 10% damage reduction from elites. This is just always good. Then in the Eagle path, we are grabbing Avian Wrath for a 30% increased crit damage multiplier. In the Wolf path, we're going to be grabbing Pack Leader, which makes any critical hits have a 20% lucky hit chance of resetting all of your companion skill cooldowns. This is the main synergy that this build is based off of. Crone and Claw makes Claw attack twice if you include Storm Strike. We build attack speed so we can hit with that double smash really quickly and frequently. Claw itself also has a chance at double strike, which occasionally makes it 4 hits per button press, all of which with a chance to crit, and both of these basic skills with an actually relatively high lucky hit chance on them themselves, making them actually quite reliable as a focus of your damage. Then finally in the Snake path, we're going to be doing our bond over here, so we can take both the Calm Before the Storm boon for a 10% lucky hit chance on nature magic skills to reduce your ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds. Again, we're hitting super often with high lucky hit chance skills. They also count as nature magic in this build, so we get a really large amount from this boon. Then finally Masochistic, which gives shapeshifting skill critical hits a 75% lucky hit chance to heal you for 3% maximum life. Again, really good for the same reasons as the last 2 boons. Lots of fast hits with a high lucky hit chance skill and high crit chance in the build itself makes us just get a lot from this boon. Now let's move on to the gear itself, starting with the uniques and the legendaries. This is a build that uses 2 uniques. I mentioned them as we were working towards here, but we have the Great Staff of the Crone. This is pretty much required to make this build actually work the way that it does. This gives you up to 9 bonus ranks of Claw as well, which is just silly, but it also makes it so when you cast Claw, you also cast Storm Strike for up to 150% of its normal damage, and this also makes Claw a Storm and Nature Magic skill as a bonus. Then we have the Storm's Companion Pants. This is honestly such a hard unique to get proper use out of. This is the first build that I've managed to make worth having it in, and for some very specific reasons, and trust me, I've tried using this a number of times. First, Companion Focus build means the affixes on the pants are good. Companion Damage, Companion Move Speed, and 4 ranks of Wolves, that's pretty nice. Then the unique effect itself makes Wolves deal lightning damage, which is okay, but it also makes them count as a storm and nature magic skill, while giving them an occasional passive effect where they call down some lightning, and replacing their active jump in on enemies to a group teleporting effect, which is both mechanically smoother and much cooler to look at too. This unique isn't required to make the build function, it just helps finish it off like a cherry on top. If you don't have this, I'd recommend just using some defensive pants instead, just the best defense that you can get from a pair of legs. Then as far as our more general legendary aspects go, on our amulet for the 50% boost in power, we have the aspect of the Alpha. This turns your wolf companions into werewolf companions and boosts the damage of wolves by up to 173%, which is a crazy increase, of course, and it also lets them spread rabies, but that's irrelevant to this build. Rabies spreading is too slow a mechanic to reliably build around currently, so we are ignoring that. We have the aspect of the Stampede, which gives us one bonus companion, as well as increases all companion damage by up to a 26% multiplier for even more companion-y goodness. Then we have the Rapid aspect for up to 30% bonus attack speed with basic skills, which is our bread and butter here. We also use the Edgemasters aspect over here for up to 20% increased damage when at full spirit, which we are at 100% of the time. We don't use core skills. This does actually also affect our companion skills as well, which is why it's on here. Then for our defensive legendaries, we have the aspect of Might for a 20% damage reduction for up to 6 seconds after using a basic skill. We are constantly using our basic skills, so this is just always active. Then we also have the aspect of Disobedience. Even after it was nerfed in patch 1.1, it's still just an absolute must-have. It is too good to ignore if you have the space for it. Then finally on our boots, we have the Symbiotic aspect, and this is what really just ties the whole thing together. The main issue this build had before was survivability. It's all well and good to make companions strong, but they still take time to kill, and while they're killing, you still have to find a way to live. The best way that I found that also helped companion was Kronstaff claw spamming with Earthen Bulwark, getting Symbiotic procs to reset the cooldown of that defensive. This gives you a ton of survivability with constant barriers activating and tons of Fortify activating from that too, as well as near constant unstoppable as a buff as a result of this too. Not to mention, if Bulwark happens to trigger Nature's Fury, it'll actually lower the cooldown of wolves by 5 seconds because that counts as a storm skill, so that's a neat bonus too. This also lets us use Earthen Bulwark to constantly proc the Resonance passive and add extra damage to other parts of the build. For our Malignant Hearts then, we will of course be using the Moonrage one for this. 9% chance to spawn a bonus wolf companion when you kill an enemy, same chance as lucky hit against bosses, and this also gives you +3 ranks to the wolf's skill. Bonus wolf is more damage, bonus ranks to wolves is more damage. This heart was essentially just made for this kind of build. Then we have the Barber Heart as well. This makes it so after you crit a target, it will absorb damage for 2 to 4 seconds, then pops the absorbed damage as an area of effect explosion around them, with the damage increasing a little bit every second too. They die early if you hit their threshold early, so there's no real negative to having even a high number on a Barber, and while this heart does poorly interact with some passives or lucky hit chances depending on your class, it works with everything that is a part of this particular build, which just makes Barber itself a solid damage increase in this case. Then finally we have the Inexorable Force Heart. This pulls in up to 50 distant enemies while you have an ultimate skill active. This simply makes sense for us. We have a long-lasting ultimate that we can lower the cooldown on a fair amount, specifically to take advantage of this effect. Pulling in enemies directly on top of each other not only makes the Wolves active leap-in skill more potent, the Poison Creeper active more potent as it can hit all of them as well, our Claw and Storm Strike spam also gets more potent with things on top of each other, but then on top of that it also makes the Barber Heart itself more potent, stacking the explosions on top of each other like this to feed into each other. With that covered then, how about the affixes and stats on gear in general? The biggest thing that you want for this is actually your helmet, which is +4 ranks of wolves at minimum. Ideally you would also have +4 ranks of Poison Creeper. My helmet is +3/+3, which is just a fault of my gear, it's not perfect. That said, basic skill attack speed, which I have here, is incredible, you absolutely want that, as is cooldown reduction. You also of course want as much crit chance as physically possible in any place that you can get it, as well as regular normal attack speed. You want crit damage and vulnerable damage as much as you can after that, they're both fantastic of course. And then on your amulet, you want to aim for 3 ranks of the Call of the Wild passive, you want the companion skill damage affix here, and then the one that I don't have, which is +3 ranks to all companion skills. Another real cherry on top to perfect it that I don't personally have. Otherwise, you want standard druid defensive skills, damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction against close, total armor % increase, total armor % while in werewolf form, movement speed, all of that fantastic stuff. And now that we've gone over that, it's time for the Paragon board. I'm only level 78 myself, so my board is of course incomplete, but I've gone and put the full one together in a build planner so you can see it properly. Of course, any build guides that we've done will also have a written component down in the comments or description down below. On the starting board, you want to take the left path for some armor increase goodness, and then take this winding path that I've taken here to the glyph socket so you can slot in the exploit glyph for bonus vulnerable damage, and also a bonus vulnerable proc mechanic that we can take advantage of. Mop up all the dexterity in the radius of this, then head up the left side here to get to the board attachment gate, and here you want to stick on the heightened malice board in its default rotation. Stick to the outer edge as you progress to the glyph socket on the left here, and then stick in the werewolf glyph once you get there for bonus damage while in werewolf form, which we are all the time, and bonus damage reduction in werewolf form too. Grab the willpower in the radius required to actually activate this glyph, and then continue progressing along the outside through the rare nodes to get to the board attachment gate on the left, and here you want to attach the constricting tendrils board with the glyph socket in the top right side. Progress up to said glyph socket following this path here, and you want to put in the spirit glyph in this one. This gives you bonus crit strike damage relative to how much dexterity you purchase in the radius, and a secondary effect applying a stacking debuff on enemies that makes them take more damage every time you get a critical hit on them. Grab the rare nodes and the dexterity in the radius, of course, then progress out of the left side and wrap around through the devastation rare node over here to eventually get to the legendary node in the middle, which is constricting tendrils, which gives you a 15% lucky hit chance with nature magic skills to immobilize enemies for 2 seconds and inflict them with poison damage for 4 seconds, 120% to the base damage dealt to the skill that triggered it. Then turn around and head out of the top end of the board to attach on the Thunderstruck board here with the legendary power in the top right and the glyph socket in the bottom left. You want to take the path that I have here through the rare nodes to get to the glyph socket as quickly as possible. Then once you have, you want to put in the Undaunted glyph. This increases your damage while fortified, as well as increasing damage reduction while fortified too. Get all of the intelligence in the radius as well to boost this up, as well as all the rare nodes. Then move out the left side of the board to attach on the inner beast board over here like I have, with the glyph socket on the right side. Here you want to take the upper path here to get to the glyph socket as quickly as possible once again, and in here you'll be putting in the tracker glyph for bonus damage against poisoned enemies and bonus duration on poison effects, which of course also increases their overall damage. Grab the dexterity and rare nodes that are in the radius to activate the glyph nice and clean, then head back to the Thunderstruck board, and you want to progress through the middle through the rare nodes and just get all the nodes here that you need to get to the Thunderstruck legendary node itself, which makes storm skills, which includes wolves here, deal 30% increased crit damage as a multiplier against vulnerable or immobilized enemies. Continuing to the right, stopping at the rare node at the top for a nice big damage increase, then head to the right side board attachment gate, and finally you're going to be sticking on the Ancestral Guidance board with the glyph socket in the bottom left. Head directly down to the socket and stick in the Wilds glyph. This increases companion skill damage for every 5 intelligence purchased in the radius, as well as secondary effect of having a 80% damage increase multiplier on all of your companions' passive damage, which again is just absolutely massive. Grab every last bit of intelligence in the radius, but don't worry about any of the rare nodes, they don't matter to us at all, and that lets us save some points so we can put even more in afterwards. Then you're going to exit out the bottom side of the board to reconnect to the Heightened Malice board, and take this little trip that we've taken here to get to the final node here, the legendary node of this board, which gives you an effect when where there are 3 or more poisoned enemies near you, you deal 45% increased damage. This will happen constantly, it'll be active constantly, it's just a nice way to wrap up the board as a whole. And that's it, Paragon board complete, and I'm actually exceedingly happy with this one myself. I think it really perfectly comes together, it nicely ties off all the loose ends, and it gets a lot of powers activated. That's everything as far as how to put the build together then, but what about actually playing it? Well, the way that we have things worked out, your main damage sources are the Wolves active ability and the Poison Creeper active ability. You have a lucky hit chance to reset that when you crit, so the idea is press those buttons on cooldown, then spam Claw to proc the Pack Leader reset so you can hit them again. While doing this, you want to be spamming Earth and Bulwark on cooldown, both for defensive gain and also for chances at lowering Wolves' cooldown. You want to use Blood Howl on cooldown for the healing and attack speed increase, and you want to essentially use Cataclysm on cooldown too to pull enemies together into tight little packs that you can easily destroy. And we have enough potential to reset the cooldown of that you never really actually have to actively save it for anything. It'll always be back quickly when you enter a fight, even if it's not available when you engage. The only real specific tip that I have is try to always use Earth and Bulwark right before Cataclysm, like purposefully line them up if the situation arises. That way Cataclysm gets an 18% increased damage multiplier from Resonance passive. Everything else is really straightforward though, and I think this build is quite fun. You're pressing buttons frequently, watching your companions do the brunt of the work while you're essentially just walking around making it easier for them while keeping yourself alive as best as you can. A genuinely functional and enjoyable companion build for the Druid, now possible in patch 1.1.1. I hope you've enjoyed this build, and if you try it out for yourself, I hope you have fun using it as well. Obviously this isn't a meta Druid build, but it's still more than decent, and it's the best companion build that I've messed around with myself by a fair margin. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.